Today, we're going to uncover the origins and the history of witchcraft in as much detail as possible. We're going to learn how society's opinions of witchcraft and magical practices drastically changed over the years, what influenced the dawn of the witch trials, and why they became such a widespread and harrowing turn of events throughout Europe and America. For as long as civilization has existed as we know it, magical practice was simply a part of everyday life. From Sumerian sorcerers performing healing incantations and agricultural blessings, to the Romans creating curse tablets and love potions, witchcraft was considered pretty standard and typical for the most part. We also have a plethora of rich and diverse beliefs when it comes to worshipping gods and goddesses, and the various festivals that arose from them. Several ancient civilizations may have believed in a mother goddess, and countless others used herbs, crafted amulets and potions, and recited spells in order to aid in healing and influencing the world around them. If you'd like to learn about the very beginnings of witchcraft right back to around 9000 BC, pause this video now and go back and watch part 1, which I've linked up here, as today we'll be focusing on more modern history, 1 AD to around 1000 AD. Whilst researching this period, what really stood out to me the most was the rise and spread of Christianity and the Roman Empire, and how they adopted this religion and implemented it as a form of control over the local populace of whatever area they were seeking to occupy. Let's dive in and explore the timeline of the rise of Christianity and the decline of paganism. Christianity was founded in 1 AD in the region of Judea, which is in present-day Israel and Palestine. In the early years, Christianity was a relatively obscure sect within Judaism, largely ignored by the Roman authorities. The Roman Empire, known for its religious tolerance, initially viewed Christianity as just another minor religious group. However, as the Christian community grew and began to distinguish itself from Judaism, it attracted more attention. The first significant persecution occurred under Emperor Nero around 64 AD, following the Great Fire of Rome. Nero's decision to blame the Christians for the fire led to brutal and public executions, marking the beginning of a more hostile relationship between the Roman state and the Christian faith. By the mid-3rd century, the Roman Empire's stance towards Christianity had hardened. Emperors like Decius and Diocletian initiated systematic persecutions aimed at eradicating the faith. Christians were subjected to severe punishments, including social ostracism, economic penalties, imprisonment, torture, and execution. Despite these harsh measures, the Christian community continued to grow, bolstered by the stories of martyrs who chose to die rather than renounce their faith. This period of intense persecution paradoxically strengthened the resolve of Christians and contributed to the spread of Christianity throughout the empire. In the early 4th century, Emperor Diocletian also issued a significant edict that condemned the practices of divination and magic. This decree was not merely a reflection of personal disdain, but a strategic move to fortify the stability and rational governance of his empire. Diocletian perceived these mystical practices as threats to the social order and potential catalysts for subversion. The edict was a stringent legal measure, imposing severe penalties on those who engaged in divination or magic. Diocletian's objective was to eradicate these practices from Roman society, thereby safeguarding the empire from internal discord and maintaining a cohesive social structure. This decree is emblematic of the broader cultural and political transformations of the time. Diocletian's reign was marked by efforts to consolidate power and implement comprehensive reforms, and his condemnation of magic and divination was a crucial aspect of these endeavours. The Edict of Milan, issued in 313 AD by the Roman emperors Constantine I and Licinius, was a monumental decree that legalized Christianity and granted religious tolerance throughout the Roman Empire. This edict marked a significant turning point in history as it ended centuries of persecution against Christians and allowed them to practice their faith openly without fear of retribution. The Edict of Milan not only provided a sense of relief and freedom to Christians, but also laid the foundation for the widespread acceptance and eventual dominance of Christianity in the Western world. The legalization of Christianity had a profound impact on various aspects of society, including the persecution of witchcraft. Prior to the Edict of Milan, accusations of witchcraft were often intertwined with pagan practices and beliefs, which were seen as threats to the Roman state religion. However, with the rise of Christianity as a legally recognized and eventually state-endorsed religion, the focus of persecution shifted. The early Christian church, while initially more concerned with rooting out heresy and consolidating its own doctrines, began to associate witchcraft with heretical practices and demonic influences. Emperor Theodosius I, also known as Theodosius the Great, played a pivotal role in shaping the religious landscape of the Roman Empire. In 380 AD, he issued the Edict of Thessalonica, which declared Christianity the official state religion of the Roman Empire. This monumental decision was not only a reflection of his personal faith, but also a strategic move to unify the diverse and sprawling empire under a single religious doctrine. Churches flourished, and Christian leaders gained influence in both religious and political spheres. Theodosius' support for Christianity also led to the suppression of pagan practices and the closure of many pagan temples, further solidifying the dominance of the Christian faith. His actions laid the foundation for the widespread acceptance and eventual dominance of Christianity in Europe, shaping the cultural and religious trajectory of the continent for centuries to come. The Council of Carthage, held in 420 AD, was a significant ecclesiastical assembly that addressed various theological and disciplinary issues within the early Christian Church. One of the notable actions taken by this council was the condemnation of magical practices. This decision was rooted in the Church's efforts to distinguish Christian beliefs and practices from pagan traditions, which often included elements of magic and sorcery. By denouncing these practices, the council aimed to eliminate any remnants of paganism that could undermine the purity of Christian worship and doctrine. This move was also a response to the widespread belief in the efficacy of magic, which posed a threat to the authority of the Church and its teachings. Furthermore, the Council of Carthage's stance on magical practices reflected the broader socio-political context of the time. The Roman Empire, under the influence of Christianity, was undergoing a transformation that sought to unify its diverse population under a common religious framework. By condemning magic, the council contributed to the establishment of a more cohesive and orthodox Christian community in an attempt to maintain social order and stability in a rapidly changing world. In 500 AD, the Pactus Legis Salicae, also known as the Salic Law, underwent significant expansion, particularly in its provisions concerning witchcraft penalties. The Salic Law was a legal code that governed the Salian Franks, a Germanic civilization that played a crucial role in the early medieval history of Europe. This legal code was instrumental in shaping the legal traditions of the Frankish kingdom and, by extension, the future legal systems of Western Europe. Witchcraft was considered a serious crime as it was believed to involve the use of supernatural powers to harm others or to manipulate natural events. The penalties for witchcraft under the expanded Salic law were harsh and often included fines, corporal punishment, or even death. These penalties reflected the deep-seated fear and suspicion of witchcraft that permeated early medieval society, as well as the desire of the ruling authorities to maintain social order and religious orthodoxy. The inclusion of specific penalties for witchcraft in the Salic law also highlights the intersection of legal, social, and religious concerns in early medieval Europe. The law served not only as a tool for maintaining order, but also as a means of reinforcing the moral and religious values of the time. By codifying penalties for witchcraft, the Salic law helped to legitimize the persecution of those accused of practicing it, thereby reinforcing the power of the ruling elite and the Christian Church. This expansion of the Salic law's witchcraft penalties is a testament to the complex and often harsh nature of early medieval legal systems and their role in shaping the social and religious landscape of the time. In 529 AD, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I issued a decree that led to the closure of the Academy in Athens, a significant event in the history of philosophy and education. The Academy, founded by Plato in 4 BC, had been a centre of learning and intellectual activity for nearly a millennium. It was renowned for its contributions to philosophy, mathematics, and science. However, by the 6th century AD, the Academy had become associated with pagan philosophy, which was increasingly at odds with the Christian values promoted by the Byzantine Empire. Justinian's decree was part of a broader effort to suppress paganism and promote Christianity as the state religion. The closure of the Academy marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new phase in the history of Western thought. The suppression of pagan philosophy under Justinian was not limited to the closure of the Academy. Justinian's policies included the confiscation of pagan temples, the prohibition of pagan rituals, and the persecution of those who adhered to pagan beliefs. These actions were part of a larger campaign to consolidate the power of the Christian Church and eliminate religious practices that were seen as incompatible with Christian doctrine. The suppression of pagan philosophy had a profound impact on the intellectual landscape of the time. Many scholars and philosophers who had been associated with the Academy were forced to flee, and some sought refuge in the Persian Empire, where they continued their work. The closure of the Academy and the suppression of pagan philosophy contributed to the decline of classical learning in the West and the rise of a new intellectual tradition centered on Christian theology. Around 650 AD, the Indiculus Superstitionum et Paganiarum emerged as a significant document in the history of the Christianization of Europe. This document, whose title translates to Small Index of Superstitions and Pagan Practices, was a compilation of various pagan and magical practices that were forbidden by the Church. The Indiculus was part of a broader effort by the Christian authorities to eradicate paganism and enforce Christian orthodoxy among the newly converted populations. It listed a wide range of practices, including sacrifices to pagan gods, divination, and the use of amulets and charms, which were considered incompatible with Christian beliefs. In 785 AD, the Council of Paderborn was convened by Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, as part of his efforts to consolidate and Christianize his empire. This council was significant in the history of the Christian Church as it addressed various issues related to the faith and governance of the realm. One of the notable decrees made during this council was the declaration that witchcraft and sorcery were heretical practices. The council condemned these practices as contrary to Christian teachings and sought to eradicate them from society. This declaration marked an important step in the Church's efforts to combat paganism and superstitious beliefs that were prevalent in the region. The Council of Paderborn's declaration against witchcraft had far-reaching implications. It not only reinforced the Church's authority over spiritual matters, but also laid the groundwork for future actions against those that were accused of practicing witchcraft. The Council's decrees were aimed at promoting Christian values and eliminating practices that were seen as threats to the religious and social order. This move was part of a broader campaign by Charlemagne to unify his empire under a single faith and to establish a more centralized and controlled governance structure. The condemnation of witchcraft at the Council of Paderborn thus played a crucial role in shaping the religious and cultural landscape of medieval Europe. A momentous event in 800 AD was the coronation of Charlemagne as the Holy Roman Emperor. On Christmas Day, in the city of Rome, Pope Leo III placed a crown on Charlemagne's head, proclaiming him the Emperor of the Romans. This coronation marked the revival of the Roman Empire in the West and established the foundation for what would later be known as the Holy Roman Empire. One of the notable actions taken by Charlemagne was the issuance of the Capitulary for Saxony, a set of laws aimed at consolidating his power and enforcing Christian practices among the Saxons. This legal code was particularly harsh, prescribing the death penalty for various offences, including witchcraft. By imposing such severe penalties, Charlemagne sought to eradicate pagan practices and ensure the dominance of Christianity in the much of Western and Central Europe. Around 900 AD, the Canon Episcopi emerged as a significant ecclesiastical document that addressed the belief in witchcraft. This text served as a guide for bishops on how to deal with various superstitions and heresies. The Canon Episcopi specifically condemned the belief in witchcraft, particularly the notion that certain women could ride at night with the pagan goddess Diana and participate in malevolent activities. It declared such beliefs to be false and the product of delusions, emphasizing that those who believed in or propagated these ideas were straying from the true Christian faith. The text also reflected the Church's concern with the moral and spiritual well-being of its followers, warning that belief in witchcraft could lead to sinful behavior and a departure from Christian teachings. The Canon Episcopi thus played a crucial role in shaping medieval attitudes towards witchcraft and superstition, laying the groundwork for the more intense witch hunts and trials that would occur in later centuries. In 906 AD, Burchard of Worms, a prominent bishop in the Holy Roman Empire, compiled a significant ecclesiastical document known as the Corrector. This work was a comprehensive guide aimed at clergy for the purpose of identifying and correcting various superstitions and magical practices that were prevalent among the people. The Corrector is particularly notable for its detailed enumeration of various magical practices and superstitions. These included beliefs in witchcraft, divination, and the use of charms and amulets for protection or harm. Burchard's work condemned these practices as contrary to Christian teachings and sought to educate the clergy on how to address and correct such behaviours among their congregations. The document also reflects the broader medieval worldview, where the supernatural was an integral part of daily life, and the Church's role was to guide the faithful away from what it deemed as erroneous and sinful practices. In 950 AD, the Romano-Germanic Pontifical emerged as a significant liturgical book that included various rituals and ceremonies. This pontifical, a collection of rites and prayers used by bishops, contained elements that could be interpreted as measures against witchcraft or pagan practices. The inclusion of such rituals highlights the Church's efforts to consolidate its influence and combat lingering pagan beliefs and practices that still remained throughout the populace. One example of these rituals is the exorcism ceremonies, which were designed to expel evil spirits and protect individuals from malevolent forces. These rites often involved prayers, the use of holy water, and the invocation of saints to safeguard the faithful from witchcraft. Another example is the blessing of fields and crops, which aim to ensure a bountiful harvest and protect against any curses or spells that might harm the agricultural yield. These blessings were seen as a way to counteract pagan rituals that sought to appease nature deities for a successful harvest. Additionally, the pontifical included rites for the consecration of churches and altars, which were intended to purify these sacred spaces from any residual pagan influence. The rituals involved the use of incense, the anointing of altars with holy oil, and the recitation of specific prayers to sanctify the space and dedicate it to Christian worship. The suppression of witchcraft and paganism in Europe between 1 AD and 1000 AD was largely driven by the rise of Christianity and the consolidation of power by emerging governments and empires. As the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as its official religion in the 4th century, pagan practices were increasingly viewed as threats to the new religious and political order. Emperors like Constantine and Theodosius enacted laws to suppress pagan rituals, close temples, and promote Christian worship. This trend continued with the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the rise of various Christian kingdoms, which sought to unify their territories under a single faith. The spread of Christianity was often accompanied by efforts to eradicate local pagan traditions, which were seen as obstacles to religious and political cohesion. It's not all doom and gloom, however, as remnants of paganism did survive during this period, despite the widespread suppression. Many pagan traditions and practices were deeply ingrained in local cultures and continued to be practiced covertly. However, some pagan festivals and rituals were adapted and incorporated into Christian celebrations to make the transition to Christianity smoother for the populace. For example, the celebration of Christmas has roots in the Roman festival of Saturnalia and the pagan celebration of Yule. Additionally, certain folk customs, superstitions, and local deities persisted in rural areas, often blending with Christian beliefs to create unique syncretic traditions. This blending allowed some aspects of paganism to endure, even as official policies and religious authorities sought to eradicate them. In Part 3, we're going to discover how these laws and regulations from the Roman period permeated into the medieval age and set the foundations for the witch trials throughout Europe. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one.